All right. Hello. Good morning. So as you probably can hear, I'm not feeling too well. So we're just gonna try this and then see where we're at. And yes, I did a stream with the suspense stuff, and it was the wrong approach. I can't remember what did we actually did we talk about render and commit phase? Okay, let's talk about let me just talk about the issue. So the current implementation is very, very simple. And I feel that's a core value of this project, is that you should be able to understand it by reading the source code, and it should be very little source code. And the way this works is that when you have this function and you have these divs, this is translated into these JSX calls, right? So you have JSX, div, null, and then you have children, which is JSX, H4, whatever, JSX, button, whatever, right? This is what is translated to. And the important thing to understand here is that the children are evaluated before the parent. This is just the nature of how this is done, right? So if the children were a function instead, that's what it actually compiled to, then the children would like be have the div as a parent. So this is a tricky, mind-bending thing with JSX. And typically this doesn't matter. So in this example here, everything has the app as a parent. That's fine, right? And if I were to insert some other component here, that would also be fine. This some other component has the app as its parent. But if I were to do this, some other component, and I put like a div in here, so the actual like parent, like in the DOM, the parent is this div, right? But well, it depends on what some other component returns, of course. But the point is that when it evaluates, the parent is app. So with the current approach, whenever JSX is called, so whenever JSX is called, we actually immediately go and generate the DOM node, and hook everything up. So that means that when it starts evaluating the app component, that becomes the current component. And then this div will run in the context of the app, not in the context of some other component. But this is really true. Like, we don't think about this, but when you pass children to a nested component, the real owner of that UI is the parent, right? It's the app. It's not some other component that owns these children. This is the owner. Okay. But what if you do something like this? Suspense. And you have some other component. Now we're getting to the crux of it. So when you have suspense, you're passing children to it, and you expect those children to be able to find the suspense, right? So if something async is going on in some other component, it should find the suspense component, the suspense boundary. This makes sense, like looking at this, but as I just told you, some other component actually has the app as its owner, which means that there needs to be a different mechanism that makes it traverse up the tree to find it. And this works in React because they have like a virtual DOM. So they have an actual like nested structure that they traverse up, kind of like traversing up the DOM itself. But we don't have that. And this is one of the great things about this. So when I first tried to like reflect and reason about this, I thought, no, we actually need a render phase and a commit phase. So that the render phase is just evaluating the components, meaning that any like JSX call like this becomes like an object of type div props null children whatever. That's the only thing it does. So it kind of builds up the tree, and then it goes through a commit phase where it goes through that tree, generates the DOM nodes, sets up the relationships between them and everything. But this gets incredibly complex. Like there's a lot of code that needs to go into making that happen. So I completely dropped that. I think I just overrided the history of the repo, but there was actually quite a few commits in there related to this approach. But then I thought, no, we shouldn't take too much inspiration from React. Like we mentioned a few times on the stream, that Solid took a lot of inspiration from React, and that can lead to bad decisions, because the decisions made for React was based on reconciliation, wasn't based on observation. So a new approach to this is what's called creation and activation. So basically the idea is that there's a creation phase and then there's an activation phase. And the creation phase works exactly the same as it does now. Like it just goes through, creates everything. The owner is the same. Everything's the same. The only thing that changes is that reactive children, they don't immediately run. So during the creation phase, it sets up everything and it tracks the reactive children. So it's kind of like it creates a creation scope. So when we, for example, render the app, that creates a creation scope. And then it starts evaluating the app. The app dives down, starts like building up all the DOM nodes and everything. And doing so, it meets these reactive children. It creates the reactive children, but it doesn't actually run them. And then when it's done, when it's creation phase, it will when it's done, when it's creation phase, it will go through all the reactive children and activate them. That's the activation phase. Basically runs them. And what can happen there is that a reactive child might return a component, right? So during the activation phase, that can lead to a new creation phase around the component, and the same thing happens. And after the activation phase, it's like applied to DOM. That's the last thing that happens. So this is the recursive cycle that goes through the tree, or whatever you want to call it. So that's a simple model to reason about. And in code, we'll see. It hasn't been implemented yet. But in code, it should be much simpler than the render commit approach. But there is a side effect to this. So suspense can't do this because it gets the wrong owner. And this is what we saw when we tried it, right? We will get an error, like it couldn't find the suspense. So as I was talking through this now, I think maybe there's another quirk to this, we're gonna see. But that means that suspense in this library means suspending a reactive child. So what you have to do is that you have to pass a function as the child. So you can have a reactive child like this, but you can tell it to be suspended. So that means that yeah. So what that means is that during the creation phase, it's going to create the suspense component, but it's going to return this reactive child, which is gonna be lazily activated, right? And when it's activated, after it's done creating the whole tree here, it's gonna run this reactive child like any other reactive child during its activation phase. It's gonna see that there's some other component, but now this happens inside suspense. So now the current component is suspense, because it's the children of suspense that's being evaluated. I think that's the thing I have to check. Yeah, I might be wrong about this. But this is the problem. Like suspense behaves differently than the others in terms of how you read it and what you expect to happen. So we do need to fix this. But what we can do... oh, look at this. It was all... Okay, so we're gonna try to look at this specific thing. Let's create a good example here. So app return yeah, I think this is enough. So please read through the activation plan to learn about this implementation of introducing an activation phase. So we're gonna have a creation phase and an activation phase, and also read the suspense plan. And then we need to reflect on this specific example, where the way I read it is that during the creation phase, it's gonna create the suspense component, it's gonna create the reactive child, and both of them are gonna have the app as its owner. And then it moves into the activation phase, which is gonna run the reactive child. But in this context, we need that reactive child to have the suspense component as its parent. And I don't understand if this actually works, how we plan it out now. Yeah, let's discuss this. Oops. No. Ah, for fuck's sake. Ah. Sorry, I'm not... Yeah, I'm not on my best today. Let's see again. So what I want to discuss here is that the way I understand this example is that during the creation phase, we're evaluating the app, and it's gonna create the suspense component, and it's gonna create that reactive child. And both of them are gonna have the app as its owner. And then when it's done with that, it's gonna go to its activation phase, where it's actually gonna run the function on the reactive child. But here we have to make the suspense component its parent, because if there's any like reactive child with a promise going on inside some other component, it needs to be able to traverse up to the suspense boundary. Could you help me understand if we're actually dealing with this now? And if we do, how do we actually do it? Yeah, this was much trickier than I thought. Suspense really kind of breaks the And I think to some degree it's also easier in React. Like it's not easier, but it's different, right? Because the place where you throw to the suspense boundaries during creation phase, right? It's not in the actual UI description in any way. Does handle this correctly. Okay, let's see. Looking at your example into plans, I can help clarify what's happening and identify a potential issue. Currently, let me trace through what happens. So app component evaluates, suspense evaluates, evaluate component function, suspense, current instance. No, that's not true. Like the thing that Claude gets very confused by, which I also get confused by, is that this isn't true. This is gonna evaluate first. Okay, so we're gonna clear this, and I'm gonna write. We're just gonna clear this. We can't talk JSX because it's so confusing. Oh, and then okay. What's happening here? Let's see. Let's do. Oh wait, no, it. For fuck's sake. This is so mentally taxing. It is true because we're using a function. No. For fuck's sake. Oh, are we creating the reactive child? Yeah, no, it isn't true. H suspense null. H some other component. No. Okay. So we are creating a reactive child here, and it will have. Okay, we're just gonna ask it again. For fuck's sake. We need to change this. Can I do? Oh, yeah. There we go. This example. So what I want to discuss here is that when we are evaluating the app here, the first thing that's going to happen is that it's going to find. Oh, no, it is correct. Because it's not gonna, like, nothing's actually happening in the props here. Yeah, exactly. And this is why we want it to be a function. Because now there is no evaluation immediately of the child. Oh, I don't have to hold this. Yeah, so the thing is, the thing that happens is that previously, when this wasn't a function, it would go in and immediately create some other component, making app its owner. But now it's just a function, so nothing actually happens here. What's gonna happen is that it's gonna start evaluating suspense. And inside suspense, it's gonna find this function child, and it's gonna create a reactive child for it, which is the suspense. Yeah, so this, sorry. So this is why it works this way. This is why suspense always needs to have yeah, so when I say, I think that's the thing that confused me, is like, I say that suspense needs to have a reactive child, which is true, but that reactive child isn't evaluated at creation time. Well, it is. But not like you know what I mean. Like it's not it's not evaluated before it's hierarchical parent. Unlike if I did this. So if I do this, some other component is evaluated before suspense. But if I do this, this is just a prop, or this is just a child. And it's not evaluated before suspense. Because it's just a function that we're passing as a child. Unlike if I did like this, then the div is actually evaluated or created before the suspense. I think I have to fix my terminology here. Yeah, I don't think there's not complete overlap between the technical reason for this being a reactive child and the way you think about it. Let me think. So what you are suspending, so if we think about this as like explaining suspense. So suspense is a way to suspend reactive children. That returns a promise. That's what suspense is. And what's actually going to communicate with suspense is whatever nested reactive child that returns a promise. So this isn't returning a promise, right? But some other component might have a child somewhere that returns a promise. So why can't you do this? Like that will be the question. Like why can't you do this? And the technical reason is because this will now be evaluated in the ownership of the app. Yeah, so when this is evaluated, yeah, so when this gets evaluated, the reactive child that's actually like returns a promise is going to be owned by some other component. That's great. But some other component is now going to be owned by app. That's what's going to happen. Maybe we should put this together. So this is like return div hello, right? So it goes into app. It immediately runs this because this is the nested property. If we think about JSX, it will evaluate that, creates a makes some other component, the current component, creates a reactive child, parent is some other component, and then some other component has app as parent. But if we do this, this is going to be run. This has really nothing to do with reactive children in that sense. That's the thing that trips me up. Because the reason we do this is because now it's not going to go in here. It's going to it's going to go to suspense, and it's going to evaluate it. Like, there's nothing to evaluate here. We're just passing a function to suspense. So it's evaluating suspense. It sees that it's a function. It doesn't do anything. The app goes into activation phase. It will run that function in the context of suspense. But that means that, like, why do we even have that activation phase then? Do we even need the activation phase? Isn't this the whole solution? Yeah. So the thing I'm reflecting on here is that we have designed this whole like new activation phase, but the original problem was that if you were to like put some other component as a direct child of suspense, it would have the wrong owner, right? But it doesn't have that anymore because now the child is a function. So that function is going to be run inside suspense, meaning that it will have the correct parent owner. But then I'm thinking there's no need for the activation phase. Like, this is the solution for suspense, is that we just need to pass the children as a function so that it gets the correct parent. Is that true? But the activation phase solves the flash problem. Okay, how? Oh my god. Let me think through this carefully. No activation phase. Is not activation. Why the parent chain works? So is not quite. Here's the subtle issue, the flashback. Even with the correct parent chains, there's still a timing problem. Let me trace it. Suspense reactive child auto runs evaluates if pending children dot size return. Yeah, but this happens before it's applied to the DOM. Happens before nested children activate. Before nested react can register with suspense. Is that true? I don't think that's true. Thinking. Are you sure this is true? Because the way I think about this is I have an app component. The app component renders a suspense component, which takes a function child that returns a nested component, which has an actual reactive child inside it. So first it starts evaluating the app, which will evaluate suspense. And inside suspense, it's going to call the child function, which is going to return for fuck's sake. This is so complex. I don't think it matters, but I can't express why. So what's going to happen inside suspense with that function? It's going to return like the suspense is going to return a function, because that's how you return reactive stuff from a component. And then it's just, oh yeah, wait a minute. This is the problem. So yeah, and this is another thing I didn't know about suspense. So a really tricky thing, oh, for fuck's sake. I'm not sure if I'm up to this today. But another really tricky thing about suspense is that it has so let's forget about this. The tricky thing is that if some other component throws, it's gonna show a fallback, right? But it's still gonna have some other component running in memory. It's just not applied to the DOM yet, which contradicts the whole concept of a component, because a component returns what's going to be displayed on the screen. So the suspense thing is basically like children something like this. It has its like pending, then like let's see, fallback, or children, right? But the point is that it needs to actually evaluate children to even know that there's something pending. So this is the yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have the energy for this today. Like, how would this... How would it even call this function? Like, I guess it would like, blah, children. It would call it. And that would go in and create everything. Yeah, and then the current component is suspense. So calling this, yeah, but this should work. And then this is gonna talk to suspense, put it in a pending state, and then that's gonna show the fallback. And then when it's not pending, it's gonna show the blah. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna ask it. Are you sure about this? So if we look at the actual suspense component implementation, the way I think about this is like this example. So basically, when the suspense component is evaluated, it's gonna call children, the children function. And in this context, the suspense component is the active component. But by calling children, that's gonna start evaluating like the actual return component. So that's gonna make suspense the parent. And as it's evaluating that, it's going to hit a reactive child that's going to go back up to suspense, tell it that it's pending. And then this happens even before we return from suspense. right? Yeah, I think I'm right. Okay, please update the plans to well, I guess we can drop the activation plan. Well, just keep the activation plan, but adjust the suspense plan to take into account what we just discussed. Like, just write it to be an implementation of what we already have. Don't take this activation phase into account. And then I want to try something. So if I have a nested component like this, and then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do hello world. And our nested component children result is children. I'm going to call that, and then we're going to return I don't know, div style color red, and then we're going to put the result in here. I wonder what's going to happen. Something, oh, what did I do? Something bad is going to happen. Oh, interesting. Children is not a function. Oh, why isn't it? I guess this is a different issue. Oh, it's an array. Oh, okay. Yeah, but we should fix this. Okay, but for now, let's just do props children 0. And this is a different thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, this is the way to handle it. I feel more confident. Yeah, this is gonna be great. Oh, what's happening here now? Wait. What just happened here? Interesting. Okay, cool. We're gonna review this, but first we need to make a couple of changes. So I'm not sure what happened, but currently now in the demo example, I have to click add to do twice to see the result in the DOM. So nothing happens the first time I click add to do, and then when I click add to do again, I see 2 to-dos. What has happened here? Because I thought this was working yesterday. Maybe something bad happened with I overrided some commits, but I thought all of them was related to no, that's not true. Hopefully you'll understand it. Is that array? Because it doesn't know about it. Yeah, this is yeah, this is related to JSX. Yeah, kind of sad that it has to go through everything every time. I wish these LMs had like super memory. We just have everything we've talked about. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is the fix. I remember this. We did this on the. No, this is the fix. Yeah, I remember now when I started playing with suspense that this was a bug. Yeah, increment counter before. Okay, great. The issue was in reactive handling of array mutation. When you called state, the code would call the actual push method, notify listeners running reactive scopes immediately, increment the change counter in flush. The problem was that step 2 happened, before step 3. So the reactive scopes will run with an old change counter value. Oh yeah, so it's the cache. Before notifying listeners. Yeah, exactly. We should do that. Exactly. Okay. So that was a different thing. Yeah, and we validated that we can do this function call thing. So let's go in and review the suspense plan now and see if we can. Look at you taking. Oh my god. Okay, let's see if we can wrap our heads around this. So this document outlines the design implementation plan for adding async reactive child support with suspense boundaries to the UI library. Async reactive child must have a suspense ancestor or it throws an error. Suspense calls children during component evaluate. Oh. So I noticed that if I write nested component, let's see, my component, hi, my component, props.children becomes an array. Is there any way to get the correct typing here so it behaves like React? Anyways, you can work on that in the background. Suspense calls children during component evaluation, ensuring async children register before suspense's reactive return function returns. Suspense mounts pending state whenever pending children size. Each reactive child renders its result value directly in the promise. Reactive child notifies suspense via parent change reversal when promises start and complete. That makes sense. Why no activation phase is needed? We don't have to talk about this. So suspense component function starts. Current instance suspense component. Content is children synchronous call. Nested components evaluate async reactive child created auto run, runs immediately. The text promise find suspense boundary, find suspense, register pending child, state.pending equals true. Children returns and now has return state pending fallback content. Yes. Suspense's reactive child is created and autorun runs. Check state pending, already set returns fallback. DOM insertion, insert fallback, no flash. Yes, exactly. So we're gonna have pending error. You have to use a function. Fine. Important suspense requires a function as its child. Yeah, this ensures children are evaluated inside suspense's context, correct parent chain. And this, so we could try not to make it like that, but then it will be just so insanely more complicated. Now there is no like additional phases or stuff like that. Yeah, registration happens during suspense's component evaluation. Probes pending error children. Great. Yeah, and it shows error. States pending error success. Mount children. Behavior. Nested component. Something, return something, subnested, blah, blah, blah. Execution flow. We have an app. It starts evaluating. Let's see. How does the app? Yeah. So it starts evaluating suspense. It calls its children, which starts evaluating all the other stuff. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, all of this should be good, I think. Yeah, I guess this is it. Like, will this also work with typing? So if I say children any, that works, but what about up here? Okay, so that works. So if I do like, hey, yeah, that's wrong. Okay, great. So this still works? No, it doesn't work. Which has, Oh, interesting. Why am I getting that? This. Oh, something happens. Okay, let's just give it. And then, yeah, so we're going to make it review the plan once more. Now that we have, ask it to read the existing code, evaluate. One thing I'm worried about is like, so children might be an array on the first call, but then it should be a fragment, right? I think it should change. Does it make sense that if it is an array that's being returned here, that we pass that as a fragment instead? So, because I'm thinking if, no, fuck that. Let's just try this. Cool. Okay. This doesn't build much confidence in the library, does it? Not at all. But I hope we are all learning something. Okay, so now please read the source code of this UI lib, and then I want you to review the suspense plan to make sure that we have the proper approach to changing the code to support suspense. This would be suspense plan. Okay. So I think this is going to work. I think. Now, let's get back to like how a user would think about this. So if you use a function as a child, it becomes a reactive child. This is not true for suspense though. That's not why we use a function, so that it becomes a reactive child. We do it because we need the suspense to be the owner of the children. So that I don't like that. That's like an exception to the rule. Yeah. Oh, but what if? But this is not a reactive child either. Oh, wait a minute. I'm thinking about this. Like, there's so many mind-bending things about JSX. So this is not a reactive child either, right? This is just props passing. This is a reactive child. And this is a reactive, well, not reactive child, but yeah. So we call, this is why it's so mind-bending. We call this children, right? Just like we call this children, but it isn't children. It's just passing a prop called children, but it's just a prop, right? But these are actual children. That is very interesting. That is very interesting indeed. So you can pass this thing here, right? So it isn't a reactive child at this point. But if you choose to put props.children here, it does become a reactive child. But that's not what we're doing in suspense. We're just calling it. This is very interesting. But it does make sense. At least oh. Excellent. Now I have a complete understanding. Let me review. Correct understanding of execution flow. The plan identified as suspend needs to call props children synchronously during component event. Blah blah blah. Proper use of reactive primitives in the plan. Leverage the existing auto-run mechanism. Parent chain traversals. The fine approach using parent chain is correct and aligns with how the library's instance tree works. Cleanup handling. Need to check is disposed in promise callbacks to prevent memory leaks when components end out during pending promises. Oh, you know what? The problem with this is that what if we use suspense like this and you expect that you can return a promise here, right? This is not going to work. Fuck, this is difficult. Right? What if you just did this? Like state count. You would expect that to work, right? But it doesn't work because it's not a reactive child. It's just called as a function. Oh, for fuck's sake. And what if you expected, maybe you expected this to work, right? Fetch user, like this should also work. You should be able to just say async user await fetch user return whatever. User.name. You should be able to do that as well. But you can't. So I do like the idea that this should be a reactive child. This should be thought of as a reactive child. But we can't use it as a reactive child because it's not going to run. Well, I think this is where I'm so confused. It's like, okay, so we have our suspense and then we have our children. If we're not doing this, what we're doing is, let's just for we're doing this, right? So basically, there is nothing pending initially. So it's gonna call children, and that's gonna trigger suspense. Moving it back to pending. Oh, this is that my brain can't handle this. Suspense is too complex for me. I had no idea this would be so difficult. Suspense seems very simple, which is a great feat if you can make it seem simple. But it's everything but. Yeah, because how would this even run? Like it will return this function, it would execute a function, it would call children, it will go up and change the state of this again. But that means that it would already append the children to, but this would happen like way later. Like it would append to the DOM. Yeah. Yeah, like in React, I think they just have this tree, right? In the background, in memory. That's being evaluated. And then they just replace the tree and do another diff, right? It's very straightforward conceptually. But this is not straightforward conceptually. Because we can't have two different, we don't have any concept of a virtual DOM. So we can't like run these children in the background. Yeah. Like, I think this needs a different solution, but I don't know what that solution is. Yeah, because we can't do what we're doing. Like, this has to be treated as a reactive child. But how is it able to call this? Maybe we can talk today about this. Uh, so I'm still not happy about our plan. Like, conceptually, it still doesn't work for me, because an important thing we have to do is that when we insert this function as a child of suspense, it's going to be an actual reactive child. This is really important for users to understand the library. So with this example, we see that it's a reactive child. And then the way I think about the implementation of the suspense component is, wait a minute. So I'm still not happy about this, because from a user experience perspective, the function we pass to suspense as a child, that needs to be an actual reactive child, so that you could write something like this. So it doesn't behave any different than any other reactive child. But then in the implementation of suspense, it would have to look something like this. This is so annoying. Like, if I go, for fuck's sake. They're doing a bad, fuck you. Fuck. I'm getting, oh, suddenly it's there again. Why can't I go back up? Like, how? Oh, esc. Okay. Fuck. So it doesn't behave any different than another reactive shell? Did I say shell? Shell. What I don't understand here is how this is actually going to execute. So it evaluates suspense. It returns this reactive child that's immediately going to run. State.pending is false. It runs the children. And now it's going to evaluate like maybe a component that has a reactive child that does something async. It's going to find the suspense boundary or the suspense component. I guess it will find it and then change its pending state to true. But now there's a synchronous execution here. So it's going to continue now to try to append suspense to the DOM. And after it's kind of done doing everything, then it's going to go back because suspense got triggered with a pending state change. And now we're going to do the fallback, and that's going to be replaced in the DOM. So how are we going to do this? Yeah, I don't understand. Don't understand how we're gonna do this. Oh my god, this is too much. Wait. Oh. You identify a critical timing issue. Let me trade through the execution to clarify what's happening. The problem timing of registration versus rendering. Let's trace through what happens with your desired API. Current plan. Evaluate component function suspense returns, state pending fallback. Reactive child created for suspense's return function auto runs immediately. State pending falls, evaluates children, the async function. This is just a function reference not evaluated yet. Returns children function reference. Append child tries to append the function, creates another reactive child. Yes, for the async function. Autorun runs, calls the async function, gets a promise, finds suspense boundary, finds suspense component, calls register pending child, but suspense's reactive child already rendered. DOM insertion happens too late. Inserts whatever suspense reactive child in return, which was the children function reference wrong. Then state pending change triggers suspense reactive, blah, blah, blah. The problem is that suspense's reactive function returns children, which is itself a function. This function then gets wrapped in its own reactive child, which calls find and sets. But by this time, suspense's reactive child has already evaluated and is being inserted into the DOM. Keep the synchronous children call. Yeah. No, we're not going to do that. Make suspense itself handle the async child. The suspense needs to actively evaluate the child and check if it's a promise. No? That's too specific. What if we add initialize it where components can register pending where? Okay, so maybe we do need the activation phase then. So the reason we do activation, so let's think about this. So yeah, so what's gonna happen here is that it's gonna build up, it's gonna create everything. It's basically gonna return this, and then nothing happens. Creation is done. And then it's gonna go in and start the activation. So it goes through, this has a reactive child, it's gonna start the activation of this. So it's gonna run it, and then it's gonna have children there, which is another reactive child. And then it's gonna start the creation and immediately activate it. And then that's gonna change the suspense, and then, yeah. No, we need that activation phase. I just didn't understand why we needed it. Okay, now please read the activation.md file and evaluate if like this is the solution to this. Like this is why we have the activation phase. It's because that we want to treat suspense as reactive children, but they need to lazily evaluate themselves. so that we don't get this flash issue. (1,214 lines of code. Oh my god. Okay, because then what we can do is actually implement the activation plan and then see if that works, and kind of see the result of it, how it's going to change. And then we're gonna implement suspense on top of that. Parent chain for any nested reactive children. The create active applied on is elegant and composable. Okay. Okay, great. Let's do it then. Please read activation.md and then implement it. There are a few other things that we need. It's like, I think now, like you can't return strings and numbers as a result from a component. There is this batching thing. That's a potential improvement, like auto batch or whatever it is called. Creation batch system. This is very nice. Like it's a very clear concept. I've been bending my brain multiple times. Also had a hissy fit. But yeah, like this suspense stuff is much harder than I thought. And the reason is that it doesn't fit into the simple model. Yeah, you should get popcorn. But what we need, and it's so like deep into the details, why we need to create this abstraction of an activation phase. Like React has a render and commit phase, but that is like virtual DOM stuff. And we don't want to have a virtual DOM. We just want to apply things. But the problem with suspense, it's partly ownership and it's partly how suspense, like conceptually suspense runs your component in the background while it's showing a pending state, right? And then as it's running this componentry in the background and waiting it for it to resolve, it just replaces it. But this doesn't really happen here. Yeah, and we're actually gonna go get into a circular issue here. This isn't gonna work. This is not gonna work. So I'm gonna try to explain it. It's so difficult to explain. But this is the gist of it. So you have this suspense component. And what it's going to do, it's going to return a reactive child because it's going to check the pending state, right? There's some state here that indicates if it needs to show the fallback. And then you have you have the children. So let's imagine like you're just immediately like suspense. Let's see. Suspense. You're immediately just doing something async, like promise, resolve, hello world, something like that. So the problem with ownership, I can do that first, is that if you were to do this, hello, and this does some async underneath, it's not going to work because hello is going to be owned by app. It's not going to be owned by suspense. So the async child inside hello is not going to find the suspense boundary. And this is how, and this is true, like app actually owns these children. You're just passing the children off this app down as a prop to suspense. So this is conceptually correct. So regardless of what we end up with here, suspense needs to take in a reactive child. And this makes sense in the context of that's what we're suspending. We're suspending reactive children. But what doesn't quite make sense is that you have to do this. Like, hello. I'm struggling a bit with this. So that's one part of the problem. But you have to do this because now it's not the app that owns hello anymore. Now it's suspense that owns hello. So when hello actually renders, it's in the context of suspense. So that's one part of it. But then an even more tricky part to this is, what if we do this again? So if I pass like, yeah, so this could be nested anywhere, right? Somewhere there's a reactive child running. So if I run suspense, and it's going to return a reactive child because it's dynamic, like it has this pending state that it's evaluating. So what's going to happen here is that the first time this runs, it's going to return the actual children. And that is going to try to be applied to the DOM. But it won't, right? Because it's going to call back up to suspense, say that it's pending. But at this point in time, all this happens synchronously. So at the point in time when we say that we want to render the children, and it notifies suspense that, oh, that's not the case, it has already appended the children to the DOM. And then suspense reacts. Then this thing runs again because it's kind of queued, right? And then this reacts, and then it puts the fallback into the DOM. So you have to have this like lazy evaluation of it. And that's kind of what happens with the activation phase. So if you think about this as a creation phase, it creates the suspense component, it goes in here, it returns this reactive child, but it doesn't run it yet, right? Everything's created. And then it goes back up, it starts the activation phase. And that's basically, in this case, just firing off this thing. But what's going to happen here now is that children is now going to... yeah, what's going to happen there? Children is going to cause... yeah, so children is going to queue, I should say that. Children is going to queue a signal to suspense that it should move into pending. Yeah, and this is where it goes wrong. Because at the end of the activation, we also want to apply it to the DOM. But children is now, so the cue for changing the state of suspense is after applying to the DOM. And we can't get away from this. Mm. Well, I guess the way you handle that is after suspense. Well, maybe this is why suspense needs to be so special. Yeah, so what we could do maybe is like, so yeah, let's forget about how it works now. So when suspense returns, mm, or when we have a suspense component that's being activated, we could check after activation if the suspense has changed its state. Because it is flagged, right? It is flagged as changing its state. But it's just not notified about it yet, which means that this doesn't run again. So what we could do after like activating, yeah, but it might be working. Like, or is this because we have activation? So, for fuck's sake. So we have our suspense. It's not pending. It's activating this. It's gonna render the children, and the children says to suspense, yeah, that you're pending now. And then we have the actual apply to DOM phase, where the problem is that suspense has not returned. So suspense has returned the children as its value now. And this is what's like queued to be applied to the DOM. But the children has already notified suspense that, oops, this is not the case. So it would need to, when trying to apply a suspense value to the DOM, it needs to check if it's pending and then run it again. But then it will also run again because it not. I don't think. Yeah, I don't like this. It's conceptually just wrong. Ah, yeah, it says that this is working. I don't understand. Create, activate, apply DOM pattern. Create, build component tree, defer all reactive child activation by adding them to a batch. Activate phase. Execute deferred autoruns in forward order, deepest first. Allowing nested children to register with suspense boundaries. Yeah, but this is what I don't understand. Because allowing nested children to register with suspense boundaries before parent auto runs. Let's see. Okay, great. But I want to challenge you on something. With this example, I don't understand how an activation phase helps us. Because even though it's going to create the suspense component here. It's going to return this reactive child that represents the suspense. During the activation phase, it's going to run that reactive child, and that's going to return the children, which in and of itself is a reactive child, which I guess is going to run the create phase again, and then register more things to the activation phase. Ah, for fuck's sake. This is so hard to reason about. It's almost like, why even do this? It's like, maybe suspense should just be its own thing. It shouldn't even do this. It shouldn't be implemented like this. It's just a very special thing. It's a suspense component. And it has a reactive child. Yeah. And the thing is, like, we don't really think about how different suspense is from a normal component. We kind of just think about it as if suspending, return fallback, or return children. Like, that's how we think about it. But the implementation details are much, much different. Like, it's very, very complex. Because it's more like, hi, suspense, go and render this children stuff in the background. And keep me posted about any async state. And so it's kind of easier in React, because what you would do in React, you would just try to render the children, right? You would just try to apply the children, and it's gonna throw an error. But or throw a promise, but that promise is kind of kept here, so it doesn't throw away anything, I think. It's just very, very different. But where was I? Okay, but what I still don't understand here is exactly how this suspense is going to work. Because as you state, the suspense component is going to return a reactive child. But when that auto runs, it's going to notify the suspense component that it's doing something async, which means that it changes its pending children size. But how does the suspense component actually look like? Because the reactive child you're referencing should then react to this change to children size. But this is happening while it's doing the auto run. And after the auto run, it's going to try to apply this to the DOM. And then it's going to be notified about the pending children size. and try to update the DOM again. This is what I don't understand. There's like 2 runs when suspense is consumed. It's the first activation phase run where it's gonna return the children that actually has that actually notifies suspense about pending children. And then it does that and it goes into the apply DOM phase. And then it's gonna notify, then the reactive child that was returned from the suspense is gonna notify the suspense about change to pending children. And then it's gonna update the DOM again with the fallback. And this creates a flash. So am I misunderstanding this? Please explain. Oh, even the AI had a problem understanding what I was saying. Oh. Okay, you were right to question the flow. The mechanism that prevents flash is reactive state for pending children. Rerun. Original autorun never reaches apply. It's interrupted by the rerun. Reactive mutations during activate can trigger parent reruns. How? I don't understand it. You're absolutely right to be concerned. Let me trace through what actually happens with the current implementation. Rerun during activation. Yeah, exactly. The critical insight is that when an async child registers with suspense during the activate phase, it triggers the suspense reactive child's autorun to rerun immediately. Oh. Oh, so it doesn't rely on... Oh. Okay, so when a reactive child talks to the suspense boundary, it doesn't like change its internal state that creates a notification that a normal reactive child would manage. It's more like the nested reactive child tells the suspense boundary, hey, I'm doing something async, and immediately it will rerun the reactive child of the suspense itself, which now has like a pending size, and then it will return the fallback, which is then applied to the DOM. And then later, when the nested promise reactive child actually resolves, it's going to notify the suspense boundary again that, hey, I just resolved, reducing that pending size. And will it also then just like rerun the return function again? Or will that rely on actual reactivity with create state? I think that's my question. Like, is there any create state here in this suspense component? Or does it just have this hard link with any reactive children talking directly to it and changing its behavior? Thanks. Why did I say thanks? Okay. The critical design decision, let me clarify. It must use create state for reactivity, okay? When async child resolves, it region clear content, resolve pending child. This must trigger suspenses reactive child to rerun. Exactly. When state pending children is called, the set mutation happens. Reactive state notifications fire. Suspenses reactive child auto. Oh, is this where I'm mistaken? Oh, fuck. I'm thinking about this wrong. Of course, when we notify, for fuck's sake. For some reason, I was thinking that the notification would be queued. It doesn't get queued. It's immediately run. For fuck's sake. So if I think about this again. So we have like this state, create state, pending, right? False. So it returns a reactive child. This is a reactive child. And then it activates, which is going to run this. And this is going to return children, which is going to do a creation phase and an activation phase in and of itself. And that's going to go up and tell suspense, hey, I'm doing something async, which immediately is going to change this state, which immediately is going to run this again. Now it's pending true. It returns the fallback. Yeah, but that's what I don't understand. What actually gets this return when it runs again? Yeah, I still don't understand it. This is so complex. The set mutation happens, reactive state fire suspense, auto reruns. Okay, and let's look at actual implementation. Use create state, pending children. Component register, pending children. Yeah, I think this can be done a bit differently, but anyways. Async child resolves. Oh, but here it calls children synchronously. Yeah, but I have such a hard time putting this complexity in my head because when you say that the reactive child of suspense reruns, what does that actually mean? Because in some part of the stack, it ran the reactive child the first time it ran auto run. And then um, oh wait, I think it means that we are doing what we originally did. We're calling props.children. Yeah, but that doesn't quite work, does it? Because then it can't be, for example, async. Yeah, this is weird. Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, I can't deal with this. Mm. Okay, but I think where it gets confusing for me is that I want the child of suspense itself to be a reactive child. So, for example, this. I wasn't expecting that the suspense component would call children as a function. I was expecting it to just return the children in the reactive child returned by suspense. So when it first auto runs, that's when the actual child of suspense is being evaluated. And that's where I got confused because if that happens and during that first auto run, that's when the suspense component is notified about a nested async react child. It's gonna notify the auto run and run it again. But you still have this happens within the stack or the scope of the initial auto run. So I'm not sure like what actually happens here. Could you explain this? Maybe this is just the kind of implementation you can't do with AI. It's just conceptually so difficult to wrap your head around that you really have to understand it. Maybe that's the learning from this. And I was thinking maybe suspense isn't a thing in an observation world. Maybe you want to think about this differently. Like it's a concept taken from React, and it makes sense in React because it's the component that triggers the suspense boundary by throwing, right? So it's a very different mechanism. Um, now I understand your confusion. You're right. There's a critical issue with the timing here. Let me trace through. You want suspense to just return, not call it as a function. What would happen? The problem. Auto run, start creation, out result, append child, creates reactive child, end creation batch. Batch activates, auto run runs. This is number 2. This calls state pending children, add child. Yeah. We're back in auto run 1's code, but it was triggered to rerun. Do we continue with applied DOM or does the rerun happen now? Yeah, you've identified the core issue. When register pending child is called during autorun 1's execution, it triggers autorun 1 to rerun, but we're still in autorun 1's call stack. Exactly. What actually happens in the reactivity? Autorun 1 is running, calls append child, creates nested. autorun 2. Autorun 2 runs calls register, mutates, then autorun 1 runs again. Disposes old child, evaluates again, returns props, applies to DOM. Returns from register, returns. Yeah, what does it do with the old result? Exactly. When autorun 1 reruns while still executing, we have old autorun 1 execution still on the stack, has old result value. New autorun 1 execution ran synchronously or already applied new DOM. Exactly. When we return to the old execution, it tries to apply its old result, which would overwrite the new result. How to fix this? Exactly. There are a few approaches. Guard against re-entrancy. Yeah, exactly. Because this can happen. So it would dispose. Yeah. Yeah, they're only on actual disposal. Track rerun generation. Yeah. Defer notifications. Modify reactivity to queue notifications during autorun execution. This is interesting. But why does this help? Oh, so it kind of finishes. It finished the activity run, and then it flushes pending notifications. Exactly. That's interesting. So during activation, there is no there so this reactive child changes the pending state of suspense, but nothing actually happens. It finishes the activation. It's gonna have these like bad children in there, which hasn't resolved yet. But then it's gonna flush the notifications, and that's gonna update the values of all the reactive children, including suspense, which is now gonna have a fallback. But again, the whole point here is that we really want this to run in the background in memory and not like recreate all these elements, right? Yeah, because this is what you want. You want this to run in the background, evaluate everything, and when all the reactive stuff is done, it's gonna change the suspense and then just apply that to the DOM. Ready, done. But that means that this isn't a reactive child. This is just, this can't return a promise. It needs to be a normal function. And that's confusing in the context of this library. Why does suspense work this way? And the reason is that we need to do this. That is the reason. Because then suspense is the owner, and we are able to run this content in the background while we are evaluating all this stuff. So even before, so when this actually runs, the children here has already notified suspense about the pending state. So it's going to start in a pending state. Like, this makes the most sense. And then it's going to resolve itself in the background. And when everything's resolved, it's just going to return the already resolved DOM elements and everything. There's nothing recreated. And the only way to avoid this let's see, nested component. Oh, what happened there? What if I do, what's gonna happen if I do this? Blip. Function blip, return h1. Yeah, it's the same, which is expected. Okay, so this is the reflection. To make suspense work, suspense needs to have a function as a child. It's not a reactive child, it's just a function. And the reason it needs that is to not overcomplicate the whole crazy thing. With like complex commit phases and virtual DOMs and all of this stuff. It's to make it simple. And the specific reason it needs to work that way is that, first of all, we need to be able to execute this in the background, right? So this is to be evaluated in the background and be able to like asynchronously resolve itself. So you just fire it off immediately. And then the suspense gets information about what is pending. And before it even returns, it has a pending state. And the reason this works is because this isn't immediately run. So it will synchronously run this. And these children are gonna talk to the suspense boundary about pending state, but nothing really happens. We just return this, and then in the activation phase, it's gonna run this, and it's already gonna be state.pending. Because this happened in the creation phase. So it's gonna return the fallback. And then as these children starts notifying about resolving themselves, at some point state.pending becomes false, and it just naturally returns, the content here. And now this content is ready. And it is the actual initial content, like the DOM elements and everything. It doesn't reevaluate this. And there is no reason to reevaluate this because it isn't virtual DOM. There is no diffing. So any dynamic UIs in these children are handling themselves, which is why it's so insanely fast. So that is why it needs to be a function. I wonder if Solid actually makes this a function. Like they use the compiler, because like suspense is a native component, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if they actually do this under the hood for suspense. Maybe we could check that. That would be interesting. That would be super interesting. But okay, so I feel confident we can do it, but that is necessary, at least from how I understand it now. Yeah. But it is interesting, like, because this isn't reactive, right? In the same sense. It's not the same as this. It's not the same as this. Oh, sorry, not the same as this. These are reactive scopes. This is not a reactive scope. But it isn't. Like, we're passing a prop. That's the thing. This is not props passing. Well, this is props passing. Fuck. Maybe, yeah. I think maybe a way to rather explain this library is that it has reactive attributes and reactive elements. Oh, sorry, I got that a bit late, Adam. What were you referencing? Yeah, so the biggest problem here is that, like, it looks like you can do something like this, right? That this is the biggest problem. It looks like you can do something like this, but this doesn't actually work. This isn't reactive, which is a big confusion. But it's also true for if I were to pass foo. If I were to pass this, one, whatever, this isn't reactive in and of itself. It depends on how it's being consumed inside nested component. So if this happens to be consumed as like a part of an element, then it becomes reactive. Yeah, this is where it kind of breaks. A function isn't reactive in any context. It's so interesting how things can look so clear from one perspective, and then when you dive deeper, it starts breaking. So props passing is where it breaks. It doesn't matter if it's a child or it's an actual prop. There is no guarantee that it's going to be handled as reactive. Unlike we guarantee that this is going to be handled as reactive, we guarantee that this is going to be handled as a reactive scope. But props doesn't guarantee that. That is the core of it from like a user experience perspective. And I don't like that. I don't like that. One thing is props. Yeah, but even if you have pending, you want that also to be reactive, right? And this is not reactive either. Well, I guess it is. This can be reactive. Yeah. So one thing is if you have your own component, right? It makes sense that you define like how these functions are consumed. Is it an on click? Is it something I want to put into the DOM? But again, like you don't really know, right? You could just be calling the function and extract its value during creation and not like make it reactive. Yeah, okay, I have to go to a meeting, but this is the thing that really bothers me about the concept now. Yeah, let's reflect on it, and then we'll do another stream tomorrow, hopefully. Okay, bye.